Ow! Greetings YouTube, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. Okay, this is a bit impromptu and really, you probably won't catch me doing this again unless I just have another book that I really want to talk about that's under the same author. Now I know that one of my last books that I did a review of was an Octavia Butler book, and well, this book review is another one of her books, and the reason why I'm doing this is because I stumbled upon this guy doing a review of the book. Name is Sean Taylor from Geek Diaspora. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him, but he did about a 3-minute review of Octavia Butler's book Fledgling. This is what it looks like. Fairly simple cover. Shows just a little girl wearing some sort of tattered, burned dress. There you can see she's black, walking down a staircase. Now, this was her final book before she died, and I decided to check it out because I had read pretty much everything by Octavia Butler, and of course I've done in my previous video. I'm not going to go into all the details. You know how much I love her work, and of course I couldn't pass this one up because it's a vampire book. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because, well, Mr. Taylor the video is like about a year old, so I'm a bit late in this, but I'm hoping Mr. Taylor appreciates this. So what I was trying to say is that he was talking about how, well, he doesn't particularly like vampire stories, where I'm a huge fan of vampire stories. Hell, I even like the Twilight books, but I made a video about that. I didn't say it, like I said before, I didn't say I love the Twilight books, I just like them. So anyway, this of course is a far cry different from Twilight. This book actually it was part of my inspiration in writing a vampire story of my own, which will be published in, to surprise, I don't know if I told you this, but it's going to be published in March, from what they told me, through a company called Whispers Press. I'll make sure to leave a link down in the doobly-doo for those of you who are interested. I'll tell a little bit more about it after this review. So let's go ahead and get to bare bones. So, as I was saying, Mr. Taylor was doing a review of Fledgling. Now, it was Octavia Butler's final book. What it is about is takes place. It's all done from first person, from the point of view of a vampire. Her name. Well, you first don't know her name because she wakes up with no memory of who she is. But later on, as the story progresses, you find out her name is Shori. And though she looks like a little girl, I'm talking prepubescent little girl. She's actually 53 years old, and there's a reason for that. Her kind actually ages very slowly, even from infancy. They undergo like certain growth spurts at certain ages. She had yet to reach her second one. So even though she has the mind of an adult, her body is still a child. That's just how they work. Now, remember in my other video I talked about how Octavia Butler makes some very interesting work, but I may not have gone too deeply into this, but she also makes some very disturbing work. A lot of her work focuses on some things that are very uncomfortable. Now, I haven't read all her work. I have not read her Parable series. I've read some of her Patternist series. I have yet to finish reading all that. But I know from what I've read, Clay's Ark and Xenogenesis Trilogy and Wild Seed, that her work can get pretty disturbing, but this book is probably one of the most disturbing she's ever made. Not in the respect that it's about vampires. It's disturbing in a way that will totally shock a lot of people and maybe turn off a great deal of the potential readers. In the respect that these vampires are, well, because they are adults in their mind, you know, they're old enough to be adult, even though their bodies have not caught up with how old they are mentally. They are perfectly capable of sexual relations with humans, or even their own kind. And that's where it gets into some of the really disturbing stuff, in that Shori's I'm gonna have to give you a little bit of background. You see that as the story progresses, you learn about who Shuri is, what she is, her people. They're actually like a genetic. They're a separate species from humans called Ina. They drink blood. The sunlight actually burns them because their skin can't handle sunlight, and they drink blood. And every now and again, they have to eat raw meat if they're like severely injured or if they're pregnant. So they need humans to survive, so they live in a sort of a symbiosis with humans, where an Ina will have other human symbiotes that are a part of their family that they feed from, so they don't have to feed them to death. And not only that, but their bite, the venom that's in their bodies actually gives benefits to the human who is part of them. Not only that, it also has a very powerful psychoactive effect on humans and makes them susceptible to things like mind control and such. But these humans have to actually come to them willingly anyway. If a human, they can take a human in an emergency, even if that human doesn't know about them, but they tend to not do that. Instead, they'll feed from the human and then use the effects of their venom to make them forget about the whole thing. Because if they didn't, they'd actually start looking for them. So anyway, and not only that, the Ina have like a lot of really enhanced senses and strength and such. Even though they look kind of thinner than humans, they're much stronger than humans are. So they are a source for like they're basically the whole deal of the story is that vampires are real, and a lot of the legends about vampires are actually grounded in reality of this species that has lived alongside humans for as long as humans, actually for longer than humans have been around. Now, and they're also very long-lived, of course. Like I said, they lived for centuries upon centuries. The story takes place in the present day, and one of the oldest Ina they encounter actually was around in the 1600s. But anyway, as I was trying to say, these Ina, they're not able to reproduce with humans. They are literally a separate species. Even though they look a great deal like us, they cannot reproduce with humans. However, the drink produces not only a powerful psychoactive effect, but it's also profoundly sexual, incredibly sexual, to the point where most Ina will even have sex with humans. It's not forbidden for them. They don't see anything wrong with it. And like I said, this is where it leads to one of the disturbing things. Like I said, Shuri, though 53 years old, looks like a little girl, and her venom is very, very powerful, and in the beginning of the story, she wakes up in a cave, naked with still healing scars from some terrible burns, and she has to go looking for food. Now, she first subsists on feeding from animals, and then she finds a human to take, and then her instincts kick in, and she basically takes that human, and later on, they end up having sex. So, as you can see, this book is not for everyone. It can be very disturbing because they don't go into hefty detail about the whole deal, but they do go into some details. And so this pretty much, even though, okay, yeah, the only way that a lot of people would probably be able to handle this book is they can keep a mindset that she isn't really a child. Yeah, I have to admit, it's pretty disturbing even talking about it. So it's at least I can give the potential readers fair warning. Now, the story in and of itself is actually quite good because, like Octavia Butler's stories, they happen to talk about issues like racism and dominance, especially in Fledgling. Like I said, where the Ina, because their venom has such a powerful effect on humans and basically makes them their willing slaves in a manner of speaking. And not only that, the human biochemistry is forever altered from their bite because they produce more blood, and if after a certain point that human can't survive without being fed from that Ina. And actually that particular Ina, each Ina has like a unique type of venom to where that not only do they make that human their own, they literally make that human their own. And if that Ina were to die, that human most likely would die unless another Ina can become that particular human's host. And it's not always successful. And the process of doing it is very, very painful because that human's body chemistry is altered to acclimate itself for that Ina. It's very, very, very upsetting. There's some instances where that has to happen in the story. Now, the story goes like this. Shori wakes up in a cave, no memory who she is. She finds a human, takes him. They become, of course, bonded, lovers, whatever you want to call it. And Shori, left without knowing who she is, what her people are, fortunately stumble upon other Ina who explain things to them, but they find out soon enough that someone is trying to kill her. That her entire village was actually where she woke up in that cave. There's nothing left of it except a few charred husks of houses and what's left of the bodies of people there. The whole place was destroyed. Someone has been trying to kill her, and then you find out why as the story progresses. And well, Mr. Taylor explains it in his explanation. So I'll tell you is that the Ina, because they live so much longer than humans and have been around for so long, their technology and their own culture is actually quite a bit more advanced than our own, and so they're much more advanced in fields, especially like genetic engineering. Shori is actually a genetic experiment by the Ina in order to make them more able to walk about in daylight. Their circadian rhythms, that's your biological cycles for day and night, they get sleepy during the day. They are most active at night, of course, seeing how they're nocturnal. They have to be. But they start incorporating human DNA into their genome, not only to give them melanin. So what they do is they had certain scientists, human scientists, who were helping them out, and use DNA from black people, who of course have a great deal of melanin, and started incorporating it into their genome. That is the reason why Shori is black. Every Ina is like actually extremely fair complected, and so Shori is not. But you find that there's some Ina who were in disagreement with this because of racism against humans, which is something that they thought never even existed in their society. So the whole deal is sort of Shori and her symbiotes, who she acquires a few more, both by necessity and happenstance, to race against the people who are trying to kill them and outsmart them while gathering enough evidence to prove one of the Ina families responsible for this. Now, the story in and of itself, like I said, that's pretty much your basic bones plot, but wow, I mean, that's one thing I always loved about Octavia Butler. She can make up a particular type of creature or people and give it so much intricate ins and outs. I mean, the way she describes how the Ina's biology works and how their venom works and how their senses work and even their social structure. Most Ina don't live in cities. They live in small communities out in the middle of nowhere, not only for protection and secrecy, but because living in cities, they explained, is too overpowering to their senses. You know, how their family extensions work, the types of clans that they have. It's a really interesting book to read if you want to see how good Octavia Butler is at creating a type of species or a creature. I mean, I'll say it like this, from the book Xenogenesis, of course, the trilogy Xenogenesis, the Oankali are far more interesting. And I do agree with Mr. Taylor in that Fledgling is not her best book, but I will say by far it is one of the most disturbing. But she, like I said, she had the ability to make a species that was just so fascinating in every possible way. So the story drives you to keep wondering what's going to happen next. The only problem I have with the book, aside from, of course, the depictions of sex in the story, for certain obvious reasons, I can understand why it was like that. I mean, she wanted to depict the Ina as something completely unlike humans in that respect. But it also seemed to have the ending wasn't so much anticlimactic as it felt a little sudden and rushed. And not only that, it felt like she would have had more to write had she lived. Even Miss Butler said that the story was sort of a lark for her. It was just something she kind of did on a whim. I mean, I don't know if any of you out there are writers, but if you are, sometimes you might have been moved to write a small story just out of a brain fart. I know I have, being a writer. So yeah, this was very much a lark, because it's not quite like a lot of her other stories. And I've read quite a few of them. And there's a book that she wrote, Bloodchild and Other Stories, which is like just a compilation of short stories that she wrote. I'll leave you to read that, because this is probably going to be the last Octavia Butler book review I've done. So that I will do. I'm so sorry, y'all guys know I'm a little ADD. Sometimes it's hard to focus. So anyway, as I was just saying, is that Fledgling, though very disturbing and having a, well, relatively overly sudden ending, making you feel like, you know, she should have told more, is quite an interesting book. Not her best by any stretch of the imagination, but still really fascinating if you can stomach the sexual content of the story. Because, I mean, it's not just the whole deal with Shori and her first human host. It's also her with the woman who's, well, for what we know, is elderly, and also some other human women. I mean, to them these kinds of things are not, by them I mean Ina. These types of things are not taboo, you know. But of course, for us, you know, normal people reading this, and I've looked at reviews on this on Amazon.com, and they range from very positive to those who are just saying, "Oh man, this is just gross. I couldn't even finish reading it." Your reaction to it is going to vary, okay? Despite the content, as I said, the story in and of itself is vintage Butler. Very fascinating characters. Shori is a very sympathetic character. And the way she writes it in such a sympathetic way to Shori, and through her experiences, you really get to see the culture of the Ina and the whole plot, you know, unravel. I think that some things that Miss Butler wanted to be really disturbing don't end up quite so much that disturbing, because when you're reading through Shori's eyes, you can tell that through the maturity of the writing, of course, that this is not a little girl writing. This is quite an adult person who just happens to have the body of a child. So you end up being very sympathetic towards Shori, despite how, well, some parts are just downright gruesome, and some they'll make you really angry. I mean, I will say this: Miss Butler does make a very good commentary on racism with this one. Even though I think the story ends up being a bit, with the exception of the sexual content, being a bit less I don't want to say offensive, a bit less gripping. No, I guess offensive would be the best word. A bit less offensive or controversial, I guess, than really she might have intended. That might have been another flaw in the book that makes it a bit less than the other books she's written. Well, I think that's about all I have to say about Fledgling. Once again, really good book if you can stomach some of the content. And I only did this review because I wanted to make it as a response to Mr. Taylor. Now, on that note, I'm done with talking about this story. I just wanted to let you know, all of you know, that I have written a book. I don't know if I mentioned this in my other stories. I've gotten a book published. It is called From Slate to Crimson. It is a vampire story about a woman who falls in love with a vampire, or vice versa. Not Twilight, not a thing like Twilight. As a matter of fact, talking about this book, which was a very strong inspiration to me in writing this story, and it's only going to be the first of many. That's the reason why I wanted to kind of mention this. So it's called From Slate to Crimson. It will be available on Whispers Press. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and make a video sort of presenting it to advertise to those of you who are interested. For those of you who are actually interested, please leave a comment down there, you know, because I could really use, you know, to sort of network out to those who would be interested in checking out the story. It's not going to be a terribly long one, and it is going to be the first in a series. So, so I think, like I said, I'll make another video, and I think I'm done here. I'm going to go ahead and post this and make it as a response to Mr. Taylor's video. Hope he'll appreciate it. So that's enough about me for Fledgling. Hey, and I'd like to know your opinions about Fledgling down below in the comment section. As always, keep it civil. Comment, rate, subscribe. And I think that's it for me now. So, as always, guys, this is DecKrash, better known as Brandon. Stay lucky and stay blessed.